Hello, and welcome to my podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts with me, Steve Penny. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be talking to some great people. I hope you enjoy listening in. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. Alan, thank you for joining me today. What I'd like to do is initially start off with you giving us a little bit of an introduction to who you are and what you do and how we sort of first encountered one another, and then we'll start going through the questions that I sent through and see how the conversation goes. So, over to you.
Thank you, Steve, and I appreciate being offered the opportunity today. So, I first met Steve through my work relationships at the University of Canterbury, and we, over a period of years, we built up a solid relationship, and that extended into our own personal lives. And inevitably, these work relationships are personal anyway. You can't really separate them. We are human beings in our work life. Mm-hmm. In my own personal life, I'm a family man, is how I see myself. I come from a family of 5 from the West Coast. I moved to Christchurch when I was 17, and I married at 20, and my 47th wedding anniversary is coming up. So,
congratulations. That's a milestone.
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. It hasn't been without its challenges, but it's like any journey you take, it's going to have a few storms along the way. Mm-hmm. Have 2 children. They're grown up now, and we have 3 grandchildren.
So fantastic.
I get to enjoy I held my daughter's 3rd child, 1 hour old.
Nice.
And the magic of that moment was no different to holding my daughter at the same time. So, yes, family life is pretty special.
Yeah.
And my children are grown up now, and I'm in another chapter. And
Yep.
It definitely feels like another chapter.
I'd say the same, that when our youngest Lucy left home back 2 years ago now to start at university, it felt like a very different life, having had children in the house for 20 years, and then all of a sudden just us in the house again. There was a huge hole that was left that we have to find things to fill. So in your professional career, you're a project manager. Is that always what you've been? Have there been any other parts to your professional journey?
So just to recap on where I'm at, I'm a senior project manager at the Christchurch Cathedral Reinstatement Project. Mm-hmm. And by background, I'm a quantity surveyor, and I worked my way into project management through those quantity surveying roles that I've enjoyed. But no, I've not always been a project manager, and when I left school I studied religious studies and psychology at the University of Canterbury, and felt like I was living with a lot of ivory tower academics. So I guess the pendulum swung the other way, and I went off and did an apprenticeship as a diesel mechanic. So I worked on...
That's quite a step change, isn't it?
I worked on heavy earth-moving equipment for 5 years.
Okay.
And I then went on to CWF Hamilton and had a position with them as a cadet mechanical engineer, and I could see a pathway there, and my wife started a small business making sewn goods, and that business grew like Topsy, and I thought it would be fun to work with her and start our own business. So as I left the company, the managing director said to me, he said, you're the captain of your own destiny, or the master of your own destiny now. He said, good luck. Now, I'm not sure he was saying it with a lot of encouragement. Nevertheless, Joe and I enjoyed maybe 15 years working together.
Wow.
Our business suffered when the government opened the country to imports, much cheaper than locally manufactured products, and our business, along with a whole lot of others, had to go off and do something else.
Okay. So would you say from your the path you're now on, so you're project managing now, at what point did you decide that would be a good path to follow? You was in doing QSing roles, and that something changed for you?
So I'd always been fascinated by projects, mm-hmm. doing quantity surveying turned out to be less interesting than I had thought. Number crunching, doing quantity takeoffs,
Yep.
endless sheets of drawings in front of you with a ruler, measuring. And while I liked the discipline of that, and I did that for some time, I did find that I became tired of the repetition.
Mm-hmm.
And in one of my QS roles, I was an estimator, and every week I would tip all of my week's work into the bin and start again. And about 1 out of every 10 of the estimates that I put together was successful. And when you won the bid for the company, you wondered if you'd left something out.
Yes. Yeah, there's always that fear when you're bidding for work. If you win the project on price, did you really understand what you were pricing? It's quite a scary thing sometimes, I think.
And I think you used to learn that the companies who won the tenders did tend to leave something out. There was a naivety about their approach, and that they had cut their price to the bone. And so there was very little left in it for them. And so it does make the commercial world pretty much rough and tumble while people are fighting to get a margin to survive.
I think the current economy is driving that even more at the moment. I think there's people out there that are pricing at less than cost to secure the work and fill their order books, which doesn't help the market at all, because it just seems to drive the prices further and further down, and that drives the quality down, and then nobody really wins. So I think it's something we need to be aware of. It's certainly in the construction industry at the moment, for sure. Okay, so in terms of your professional life, is there one sort of standout thing that you would say is your proudest achievement up to now, or is there sort of several things that you would point to?
In my professional career, I guess the thing I'm most proud of is a couple of them that come to mind, but one of them I remember when I finished the Rehua project at the university, and I remember the handover to the occupants of the building. Mm-hmm. And I had spent 5 years working on this project, and when it came to the handover, when we had a Maori welcome, and we invited the College of Education to come from the Dovedale campus across to the Island campus. So for them it was quite a moving ceremony, and we had the Maori warriors who were calling and chanting across the courtyard as the members of the Dovedale campus came across to the new building. And apart from the significance of the welcome and the event that was taking place, I was just captured by the fact that my work was insignificant compared to the human activity that was about to take place in it. Mm-hmm. And I remember I had a distinct lump in my throat while I was listening to the children singing a waiata as they welcomed the visitors inside the building, and there was a choir up on the balcony of the foyer, and they also sung for the occupants as they came across.
That would have been quite something to see, I think.
And after that, every day they would open the building up, and a man would stand in the foyer, and he would sing a waiata, and a group of loyal followers would turn up with him, and at 9 o'clock every day, and they still do it, they wake up the building with a waiata. They sing.
That's awesome.
So the human touch,
absolutely.
Our humanity exceeds all of the bricks and mortar and reinforcing steel and the other things we do.
It does, yeah. I mean, I had a sort of similar experience for myself. When I first came over to New Zealand, I was working for a company that did the design for the services for the Kaikoura Hospital, the replacement of the old hospital building that was there. And throughout the design process, I sort of find healthcare projects in particular are very seem to really tick a few boxes for me, because they do have an immediate impact on their local community, and it's all usually a positive one. But the human side of that for me is my PA at the time actually was born in the hospital, the original building, and she came with me to the groundbreaking ceremony, and having a similar sort of Maori ceremony at the groundbreaking ceremony was actually really moving, being there at dawn, which was a hell of a journey from Christchurch to Kaikoura to be there for dawn. But actually the whole ceremony itself and the sort of the respect that the Maoris have for the land and the way that the land is used, it was really it really opened my eyes to that culture that I wasn't really aware of prior to that. So I think it's it's something that we Westerners tend to miss a little bit, that sort of connection to the land and what it means to the family and the previous generations and the future generations. So I think that's anything that gives us that connection, gives us a place to be is valuable, I think. So thank you for sharing that. What about, would you say, in your personal life, what would you point to as a major achievement that you're very proud of?
About 15 years ago, I did a trip to Nepal, a mountain biking trip, and I had a guide who I engaged, and he took me to his village. At the end of the biking trip, he said to me, "Do you want to do more biking, or would you like to see the real Nepal?" And I went to see this village, and there was a partially completed school building there, and he said that they'd not been able to complete it. And in the course of my time with him, we went and sat up on the hill that evening, and he gave me a lesson in being a global citizen. and here's a young man from a remote village. But he said that you have seen me, you've seen me as a guide, and you spent time with me. He said, but this is the real Nepal. He said, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And on the spot, I just said, I think I could help you with that. I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I did commit to helping him.
Yep.
And he then, I organised the funding. I raised funds back home.
Yep.
Some of it came out of my bank account, some of it came from friends. My daughter organised a photo shoot. People gave me things, I sold them. Anyway, we raised a small amount of money which they used for reinforcing steel and cement, and they got for the classrooms, they got the timber for the doors and windows out of the jungle, so they had a pit saw. They actually cut the timber. You could still see the saw marks in the timber. And I've seen photos of when they put the slab on the top of the classroom, and they had one bucket. They had a donut of gravel. The gravel had been brought up from the river just in that bucket, and they put the cement in the middle, they put some water in, and they stirred it up, and then a chain gang of people carried the bucket up onto the roof, and they just poured cement all day from the bucket, and gradually moved across the roof.
Yeah.
And that was their process. So when I turned up there for the opening, they said to me that we're opening in a week's time. Would you like to come? And I said, I'm on the other side of the world. And
Yep.
and I said, but here's some words. I sent some words to my friend to say at the opening, please say these words. And he said, they got your words and they want to wait. So they waited until I turned up, and I wanted to be there with my son.
Yep.
And so we went to the opening, and I can remember getting out of we hired a Jeep to get in there. My friend said, you go on ahead, the people are waiting for you. And so I did, and as I went round the corner, there was 2 rows of children, and there are people who garland me in these beautiful flowers, and I think they're marigolds, and they are heavy. If you've got 30 in each garland and you've got about 15 garlands, the weight
Start to feel a bit of weight, yeah. Wow.
But I stood there and these children in front of me in this 2 rows winding up the hillside to the school. I thought, oh my God, to be connected to this, it was such a humbling experience.
Imagine, yeah.
And I had to stop and turn my camera on and just hold it there in front of me as we walked in, because I thought I never want to forget this.
Yeah. That's a pretty amazing thing to do. And again, you're having a direct impact on a community in a really positive way by giving the help that you did. And I think it's something that you can always look back on and say that's something that really made a difference to people's lives. Sometimes with what I do, it's hard to see how you're making that difference. It feels like you're just doing another project, and people are going to move in and then they're going to move out, and then they're going to be another project, and it doesn't feel like you're really contributing too much. But when you do things like you've done there, or the healthcare work that I've done, I think it just feels like there's really much more of a connection with the society, because you're doing something that's physically going to be used by a wide range of people, and it's going to have a positive impact on their lives. And I think that that is really important certainly for me. I'm finding as I'm getting older that I like that idea of having a connection and having a base that's tied into a community somewhere. So I think that's amazing that we've done there. I think it's really
the sense of belonging to something.
Yeah,
I think that a lot of people feel very disconnected today, but at that one moment, I felt as connected as I ever had been, and as part of something. So I mentioned holding my child for the first time.
Yeah,
that's also a moment of great connection.
Yeah,
you feel like you belong to something bigger than all of us.
Yes, indeed. That's very true. Just got sort of on I don't know whether you call it more negative side, but what would you point to as saying is your biggest challenge professionally?
Professional challenges, I guess there have been many.
Yeah.
I think professional life is demanding, especially if we put ourselves into positions of responsibility. And I found some of my previous roles to be highly political. They're outside of my control, and yet if I look back, the biggest learnings I've had came from the most adversity. And I just hate being beaten up, but nevertheless, there was considerable learning there.
Yes,
and
yes.
That's just
Well, I
how
think we had a shared experience of being beaten up, didn't we, for what felt like a very long time.
Yes, and it carried on in other forums, but nevertheless, the idea that adversity is a bad thing it ain't necessarily so. Sometimes we should look for the.
I think certainly in your working life, I don't think it's true in your personal life, but in your working life, I think it's true to say that there's not really good experiences and bad experiences. There's experiences, and what you take from them can be good or bad. And I think you have a lot more control about how you react to things in your professional life than you may do in your personal life. And I think you're right. You learn a lot more when things challenge you. You learn a lot more. If things are easy, you don't really learn because you don't have to, because it's easy. I think that's part of that whole process of getting outside your comfort zone to some extent, and challenging yourself in some way every day is the way to carry on going. What about, would you say, in your personal life, has there been any particular challenges that you're happy to share?
No problem. Probably when I was 11, the loss of my mother was a profound impact on me. I was one of 5 children. I was the middle child, and I was 11 years old. So that was an unscripted event.
Yeah.
And at that time, people didn't know how to prepare children for that, and because I guess my mother was preoccupied with cancer, she was in denial, and my father was doing what fathers did back then. So she disappeared one day, and it came as a rude shock, and it did take me a long time to adjust to that, and I was having counselling when I was 40 and going through a grief resolution process that I adjusted to that, and again I look back and say, well, nobody asked for that, but it certainly shapes me as an adult.
Yes.
The who I am now, and my respect for people and empathy, and the desire to communicate instead of being silent. All of those things I learnt from there. So I've tried to turn that experience into something that makes me a better human.
I think that men in particular do have a real challenge when it comes to dealing with issues like that, that there's been a long history of us having to just be broad-shouldered and stiff upper-lipped and deal with it and not break down in any way. And I think that's probably what drives the issues that we have globally with men's mental health, is that we don't feel like we can show emotions in a way that would not, society would say you're being weak. If you're crying because something upset you, well, you're being weak. But it's not. I don't believe that's true, and I do think that mental health issues and dealing with things that are emotionally difficult and mentally difficult is something that men need a lot of help with. because we don't feel like we can share as much as we should. And I've certainly found in my life that that being able to talk to people about what's going on without those filters in place, without concerning myself about how I'm perceived by the person I'm talking to, is actually quite cathartic, and it allows you to deal with emotions that otherwise would be harmful if you tried to keep them in. And I think it's a really, we're going through a big change, I think, at the moment in the society, allowing that sort of thing to happen. And I think it's a good thing. But I still believe there's quite a lot of stigma around men's mental health and men's ability to talk about those issues. So it's good on you for sharing. Thank you, Alan. One of the things that I'm keen to understand is if there's anything that's happened to you or anything you become aware of that changed your perception in some sort of fundamental way that you weren't anticipating.
Overseas travel for me has been caused quite a dramatic shift. I haven't travelled much, but I've been to Nepal 5 times.
Right.
And I found those experiences to be intense, but also awakening and unsettling. And I found the people to be really interesting, and their spiritual nature to be very interesting also. And so when you're greeted in Nepal, they greet you with namaste.
Mm-hmm.
And they just say it off the top of their lips like you say hello. Hello's hello, but namaste means I see the divine in you.
Okay.
So they don't just say namaste, they put their hands in front of them in a prayerful position, and they say namaste.
Yeah.
And you watch children do it, and it is thoughtful and considerate. And our hello is almost cursory compared to the attention that they would give. So this idea that we see the fullness of the human being in front of us, that really captured my attention. And a friend back in New Zealand, when I discussed with her, she said, there's an African tribe, and when they greet each other, their words in African are, I see you.
Yep.
2 people walking to each other, I see you.
Yeah.
And if there was anything that causes more pain today than anything else, whether it's pain that men might be experiencing, it is to be invisible to their loved ones, in the workplace, on the street. And so the gift that we bring to others is to see them.
Recognising they exist and valuing them in some small way, even if it's just, I think one of the things that I've noticed recently is that the habit of holding the door open for the person behind you seems to have disappeared. That you just walk through the door and let it close behind you, whether there's somebody immediately behind you or not. It seems to be quite a common thing that's happening. And I think that's part of what you're saying, is that you don't recognise there's anybody else in the world other than you. And I do think that social media has a part to play in that we become so involved in our online presence that we ignore the real life around us to a great extent. And I frequently see people walking along the street that are staring at their phone, not looking where they're going, not being aware at all of what's going on around them, but they're just interacting with their phone all of the time. And I don't think that's healthy for us as a human race. We need that personal touch. And you don't get that from staring at your phone and having Instagram likes and Facebook likes and the rest of it on every picture you send out into the internet. And I think you're right that we're missing something in Western society at the moment about how we interact with one another and how we connect to our communities. And what you're saying about the guys in Nepal, or the people in Nepal, and how they greet one another, that's part of that being connected, isn't it? I recognise that you're a human being. I recognise that you have some value, and I'm willing to accept that value into my life. And that, not doing that as we don't do that at all in the West, really. The idea of a handshake is about as close as we get. And a lot of the time that's very, very perfunctory as well. It's just like, I have to do that, but I'm not really putting any effort into it. And I think that's something we really do need to change in the society that we live in, because that lack of connection is promoting the divisions we're seeing everywhere, I think, across the Western cultures, for sure. Very good. So, how would you say that awakening of that idea of connection has impacted you when you've come back into New Zealand, where things are a little bit different, certainly in the Western culture? Would you say it's changed how you deal with people in some way?
Yeah, I think it's made me more inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I hadn't travelled before, but I have now, and I have been the marginal race in a bigger community. Normally it's the other way around. Everywhere the white guy goes, someone else is in the minority.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I've travelled and I've been in the minority. There's not a white person in sight. And it gives you a chance to reflect on just how I see the world. And
Yeah.
so the thought is that I'm more inclusive, I'm more accepting, I'm less likely to judge somebody else, even though they may live in a completely different way to me. I can see the value in all of the different ways of living.
Mm-hmm.
I have less boundaries. I feel like I'm more tolerant, and that I could be many things. I could go and live in Nepal, I could retire there.
Yep.
And spend time with these people, and I wouldn't feel out of place. So typically in our communities we live in one little layer like fish in the ocean, ignoring all of the layers above and below us.
Yep.
And there's a richness in the world we occupy.
Absolutely.
But when did we last have people of another ethnicity to dinner at my table? How many friends of another ethnicity do we have? So
Yeah.
we talk about equality and so on, and we say, oh, why do those people come to our country? And then they all stick together. It's because we all stick together ourselves.
Yeah.
It's natural and normal.
We're very tribal, I think, human beings, and having that people around you that look the same as you makes you feel more the same as you, makes you feel more comfortable in some way. And I think that's a learned behaviour. I don't think it's something that you're born with. And I've certainly found that by living and working in London, which I did for a very long time, I was exposed to a lot of different cultures, because London's a very multicultural place. Still has its racial issues, but you are certainly exposed to a wider range of cultures than you were in where I grew up in the southeast of England. But then travelling overseas, again, as you say, you get to see a different side to the world, many different sides to the world, by going to different places. I've been to Egypt, I've been to many different places in Europe, I've been to the US, I've been obviously here to New Zealand, I've been to Hong Kong and Macau and other places as well. So having that more global experience does, I think, give you a very different perspective on life and on people, and it also can give you an opportunity, I think, to learn a lot from other cultures that you can bring into your own life, and hopefully improve the way that you act, as you're saying you have from your time in Nepal. So I think that's it's really important that we all try and get as much experience as we can in our short time on this planet, I think.
Yeah. So I guess one of the bigger impacts in the workplace is I'm less directive and more of a facilitating manager. So in a group, I aim to help the group achieve its purpose. I don't see my role to be in command or in charge or giving directions. The groups I'm part of are normally highly skilled professionals. So really it's a matter of helping the group to find its purpose and get to where it's going. And that's been very satisfying, and I think that for me has opened the door to my current role, which is a role where, unlike any other project I've been involved in, it's all on a cost reimbursement basis. So we're spending $150 million and it's all on charge-up. And you'd have to be frightened of that if you were a typical client group anywhere in New Zealand. The reality is quite different, and there's great opportunities for people to collaborate and come together and do a whole lot of things which people working together do easily, which you don't do when you're under contract.
Yeah.
And there are strict edges to your conduct, and every change is a variation. And can you help me? No, it'll be an extra.
Yeah. I think that's part of the challenge that the construction industry certainly faces in this country and everywhere else that I've worked for that matter, is that it's set up to be confrontational to some extent. You have a contract that's usually let to the lowest cost. It's rare that it's not the lowest cost that wins a bid, and everyone has their own separate scope of works that's clearly defined, and there's no blurring of the edges at all. So if there's anything that's not sitting comfortably in any of those scopes, you immediately get a conflict, and that generates bad feeling and generates arguments and stress, and I think the more collaborative approach that you're discussing you get a much better outcome. Everyone feels like they're getting their own fair crack of the whip, I guess, and getting, everyone's giving their best to give a great outcome for the project. So I think, that's certainly the way I'd like to be working more. More collaboration and less of the confrontation is healthier.
We probably need to talk about the benefits of it more often,
yeah,
and encourage clients to be a little bit less risk averse, and to talk about the benefits associated with human beings cooperating directly.
Yeah.
It does away with the need for complex correspondence management systems, documentation systems. A lot of things get resolved face to face.
Yeah.
You can have, I'm sitting in a site team this morning with 8 consultants, and we're in the same office as the site team.
Yeah.
And the site team are walking in and out, talking to the consultants. I'm dialoguing with the consultants about challenges, and because 2 of them are there, I can grab the QS from the site team and we can go off to a little meeting room and have a quick discussion about some strategic matter. And you can't easily do that. You have to correspond and issue an instruction, a request for information. And
yes, it becomes very convoluted and time consuming. Yeah. Would you be able to point to a person that you would say was the biggest influence in your professional life?
Before I joined the job that Steve and I worked on, I could say in my career I'd only had one great leader. So I was in my early 60s at the time. So one great leader I could think of, and he worked with me at the start of the Christchurch rebuild, and he had a philosophy about delivering work according to a pipeline model. And so within a pipeline, if there's any constraints, it's a bit like somebody putting their foot on the hose. You get a trickle come out the other end. So you can have many people who've got their foot on the hose, and you deal with them. That's how you get your work done. You're constantly watching the trickle coming out the end to make sure the flow's increasing. And that's a measure of how effective I am as a manager in that environment. Apart from that, he was a hell of a nice guy. I then went to the university and I met 3-4 amazing leaders, and for a time it was a little bubble, and I was
a high performing team, I think.
Yeah, I was lucky to be with that team, and and they were there in response to the earthquake reinstatement program.
Yeah. And
so I was grateful for that, and I don't think people should go expecting they will find them everywhere, but I think in our work life we need to know they do exist.
Yeah. And
we have a right to good leadership.
Absolutely, I think that's the minimum you need anywhere really, is that you have a leader that is a leader and not somebody that's got the name of the leadership but doesn't actually do the role. I think in my career of almost 40 years now, I've experienced some very, very bad leaders and some very, very good leaders, and the difference it makes to your life is astounding. When you have a good leader, work seems to be is a happy place to be. It's something new. You get up in the morning and you're glad to be going into the office. You're glad to be doing the work you do. If you've got a bad leader, then it's dread every day. What's going to happen today? How bad is it going to be? And it's no way to live. It's no way to live. We spend a lot of time working, so you want to have a positive view on work, I think.
I do think that in environments where we don't have that leadership, the person that turns up at work every morning, if it's me, is the small me,
Yeah.
When I work for these great leaders, I feel like anything's possible.
Yeah.
The big me is on duty every day. It's like there is nothing in my way. The confidence and can-do attitude in the face of other leadership. You're home by, leaving it out the door at 5 o'clock. It's work to roll. Under the other environment, you wake up in the middle of the night, you're scheming, you're thinking about how might we do this better. There's amazing things happen.
Yeah. I tend to find that with the bad leaders, I wake up in the middle of the night finding ways to avoid the issues that I know are coming my way. But yes, I think that's, I think getting that work-life balance is quite important. So that sort of leads on to the next thing for me. I know that you're a keen cyclist.
Cycling's been a passion for me in every facet. So I've mountain biked and crashed and had some fairly serious injuries. I've moved on to gravel biking.
Yeah.
Gravel biking I have done for some years in bike packs through outback Australia. I biked the length of New Zealand. I biked in Thailand with my daughter. Biked in France with my son over some of the areas that the Tour de France goes.
Wow. Okay.
And I've had my mountain bike trips in Nepal as well.
Yeah.
And so biking has been the key to adventure, I guess. I realise inside me there's this thing that wants some adventure, and even to come here in the rain today, I don't mind that because I know it wakes me up.
Yeah. So the trip across the outback in Australia, how long were you cycling? How far did you cycle in Australia?
So that was 900 kilometres over 9 days.
Right.
And it was from Perth to Albany.
Okay. So
and I had thought
on
it
the
would
west
be
coast.
I thought it would be hot weather, but actually we got frost there on a couple of days, and I was alone most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd taken sufficient maps, and I had a GPS record in my Garmin so that I could follow that each day.
Yeah.
But I was still worried about snakes.
So I did, the least you worry.
I did give myself the luxury of having a tent so that at least I didn't wake up with something curled in the sleeping bag beside me.
No, I've got my brother's in Australia in Gympie on the sort of on the Sunshine Coast, or that part of Australia, and I've friends in Sydney, and the tails of the snakes terrify me, and they just seem to be everywhere, even in the cities, which is not. My wife will never move to Australia for that reason alone.
But it also taught me that these people are coexisting alongside these things, and they take it for granted. Why is it that I'm on high alert and these people are just going about their daily lives? I figured I need to learn.
Yeah, I think it's. I do think if you're only a transitory visitor there, then you are more aware of the risk. When you live there every day, it's like crossing the road. If you've never crossed a road before, you'd be terrified of all the cars running around. But if you cross a road every single day, you know what you're doing, you're aware of what the dangers are, you don't think anything of it. I think it's that exposure is what takes the fear away, isn't it? That, I've been here for 10 years and I've never been bit by a snake, so snakes are not scary. But, whereas all we see is the news stories about snakes biting people. And there are no snakes over here. So you go over there and you're immediately thinking, well, there's snakes over here that can kill you. But to be fair, in Australia, pretty much everything can kill you. So the snakes are only one thing.
I did sit down for lunch on the first day, and I was so pleased to stop, and I had something to eat. And I no sooner got my food out than I look around me, and the log I'm sitting on is covered with ants. Oh. They can smell the food, and they're not little ants. And I stood up and realised that I'm in a different part of the world.
Yeah, they have horrible fire ants and all sorts over there, don't they? I know. That's I just don't. I think that Australia for me is one of those countries where it's quite obvious that it doesn't want humans, really, because everything over there is dangerous. So why do we insist on being there? We only live around the edges, really, because the middle of it is a hard place to be. And I think the First Nation people over there are remarkable people that have managed to live in a symbiotic relationship with what is a very savage country for a very long time. And we could probably learn quite a lot from their approach to life. So cycling is there anything else other than cycling that you do as a way of recharging?
I guess I'm interested reader. I'm really keen on learning about stuff I know nothing about. I tend not to read fiction. I guess I've drifted out of reading fiction. I did as a child, but not as an adult.
What was the last book you read? Putting you on the spot.
Well, I'm reading a book about exercise at the moment, so that's probably not a good one.
Well, wait,
I have, sitting beside that book, I have The Power of Now, which is an interesting book about being mindful about the present. And
I think mindfulness is a big thing nowadays, isn't it? Being, listening, actively listening to those around you and not talking over them all the time is, I think something we can all get better at.
Yeah, well, we only have this moment, and yet people are preoccupied with regret about what happened in the past and worried about what's happening in the future.
Yeah.
And suddenly you lose that nowness, and the joy of watching children is they are present.
Yeah.
They're miserable one moment, and then the next minute they're into another moment.
Yes.
We carry that miserable moment with us.
For days, days and days. Yes, that's very true. Just thinking about your life experience up to now, if there was some way of you giving a younger version of you some advice, what would that advice be, and why would you give it?
Well, the thing at my age, at age 67, the biggest myth that I share with other young people, if they're interested, is the idea that getting old is to be feared and resisted. So I like it. Michelle Obama said that the best is yet to come. And if we were to live our life with that in mind, as if I haven't seen it yet, but there's something really good for me coming around the corner, old age should be seen as a really good time. And for me, I'm lucky. I'm at the peak of my health. I'm at the peak of my career. I've landed an amazing job I'm grateful for. I am close to my family.
Yeah.
My wife and I have been married for a long time, so there's a lot of constancy and solidarity, and yet I can go and explore adventure whenever I want.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about what's in the bank account too much. So the idea of being old and people being fearful of that, it's like my world's expanding, and you talked before about we get to a chapter in our lives when the children leave home, and yes, there's the empty nest syndrome, and there's an adjustment and the loss, because it feels like a loss.
It does, yeah.
Feel it at a heart level, there's something missing, it's gone. But then there's this other opportunity.
It's an opportunity for sure.
And if we don't grab it, then we miss out. And to live at age 20 or 30 or 40 like there is no tomorrow, and burn the morning and burn the evening, ignoring the fact that, oh man, I can do some cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I've met people who said, oh, I just love what you've been doing in Nepal, and I would love to do that. And I say to them, Matt, where are you at in your life at the moment? Oh, I've got young kids and this and that. And I said, well, I haven't.
Yep.
I'm in a stage where I can.
Yeah.
And if you want it, you have to wait.
And
and so the idea that there is a not now but later, our modern culture doesn't deal with that. It sells the myth that you're screwed.
Yeah.
And I've worked with guys who are 50 and they just talk about being old. And my Garmin tells me every morning that I have the VO2 max of an excellent 20-year-old. I'm in the top 1% for my age group. Wow. But I have the opportunity. It's available. I can go and ride my bike and I can get that.
Yep.
Or I could go and be excellent at some other thing. I could study rock mosquitoes or something. But if you want to play a piano or go and work with disadvantaged kids at 60, 70, 80, 90.
The only thing that's stopping you is you.
Yeah.
Really. I think you're right. I think that there is, the fear of the future is something that really holds a lot of us back, that we're just so worried about whether it's going to be good or bad that we just put obstacles in our own way and hold ourselves back from achieving what we want to achieve. And removing that fear of what's coming next is quite difficult. I think it does require you to really think ahead and plan. From my own perspective, I'm looking at my future and what I'm doing with this business and where I want to get to, and having that focus of where I want to be when, in 5 or 6 years' time when I want to retire, is what's helping me to make the decisions I need to make about how I run the business and what work I chase and all the rest of it. And I think you actually looking forward to the future and planning for the future and not being scared of the future is really is the best way to deal with that sort of issue of fear around what's coming next. On the subject of travel, you've talked about you've travelled to a few different places around the world. You've been to France, you've been to Nepal and to Thailand and over to Australia. Is there somewhere that you've never been that you're really keen to get to?
I'd love to go everywhere.
Who wouldn't?
So I haven't travelled a great deal, but the taste I got of it made me realise that it's not the places so much as the people.
Yeah.
I met a plasterer from Birmingham at 3 a.m. in the airport in Mumbai, and I was in an 18-hour stopover. I couldn't leave the airport, so I just wandered around the airport, filling in my time, and met this guy, and we talked in the middle of the night. And as we left, he said to me, "When I get home, I'm going to tell my mates," he said, "you ain't no fucking quantity surveyor." And it was this lovely recognition that in his time spent with me, he didn't know anything about me except what was in front of him, and he liked it. And we'd had these amazing conversations that had gone on for hours in the middle of the night between two strangers. And so
I think sometimes those chance meetings can generate some very interesting outcomes.
Yeah.
You bump into somebody and you have a conversation with them and you find out something remarkable about that person that really opens your eyes to the possibilities of what you can do in your own life. And I think that it's best to grasp those opportunities whenever they come along.
I was thinking about places that we might like to go to, and I did have an ambition to do the Silk Road on my bike.
Okay.
And I planned it. I got 6 months leave from my work. My work said, "We want you back, so your job's there when you come back." Oh, fantastic. So, and I had told my wife about this, and she said, "Oh, that's all right." Nod. And I said, "I'm going to do this warm-up trip. I'm going to bike the length of New Zealand to see if I really can do this. And if I do, great." So
how long is the Silk Road? That side?
It's 12,000 kilometres.
Wow. Yeah, that's halfway around the world.
Yeah. So it was a significant distance, and you go through multiple countries. And, but I was up for the risk. But when I got home from my tour Aotearoa, I was really buzzing and said, "Right, ready for this next thing now." And Jo said to me, "I'm not keen." She said, "I'm worried that you won't come back." She said, "You might just love it so much you just
keep cycling."
Keep cycling. And you have to say, well, anything can happen.
Yeah.
And it does. And then there's the security. And so
you're crossing through some fairly unstable places, I guess, on that journey, aren't you? Where would you have been starting from?
I would have started in Vietnam and biked up into China.
Yeah.
Then through the Stans.
Yeah.
And through Turkey.
It's a long old trip. Yeah. There's quite a lot of challenging parts of that journey, geopolitically as much as physically, I think. So
the interesting dilemma for me was, so is it going to be this dream that I have planned and schemed about for a long time, or is it to be my wife?
Yeah.
And I don't have too much trouble. I know where my north is, and we only had the discussion once. It lasted 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I didn't come here to make your life miserable. My purpose is to be in relationship with you, and if that's not going to be a happy one because I'm away," I said, I'll do something else.
Yeah.
I'll do short trips.
Yeah.
And we reached a compromise, but I still think about that.
Yeah.
And I still go seeking adventure in small ways. So this weekend a friend is biking 500 kilometres in 24 hours.
Wow, okay.
And it's one of his, he likes doing these wacky challenges, so I'll join him. And last one I did with him, we started at 2 in the morning and we cycled into the sun and biked all day. We were hill climbing. We did Everesting, climbed Mount Everest in a day, using Mount Pleasant as the ride.
Yeah.
And so I didn't do all of it. He finished, he did 9,000 metres of climbing on Mount Pleasant, and I did about half that.
Right. That's a lot of climbing, though. 4.5 kilometres.
But the adventure bit of biking at 2 a.m. when everyone else is in bed.
Yeah.
On Tour Aotearoa, I biked when the sun rose. I was still biking when the sun went down. I biked in remote areas in pitch darkness with just a light and alongside river gorges, and it wakes you up.
Yeah.
It seriously wakes you up.
Sure. The thing is, I guess, if you're doing something like that, you actually have to be in the moment, don't you? You can't drift off in your mind, because you'll end up having quite a serious accident if you do that.
I think that's part of the drug.
Yeah.
Or the draw card of these things is that for the moment, while you're biking in uncertain places, your mind is never anywhere else. I biked on the 5 Passes cycle tour.
Yeah.
And I did 548 kilometres, and I was about 6 inches away from the wheel in front of me in a bunch of riders. And it really shapes your perception. There's nothing else going on in your head about where's the wheel, the wheel.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be the person who brings the whole team down.
No, absolutely not. No.
So being awake, for me, is our most valuable human condition. And so being on a bike wakes me up.
Yeah, I found that when I was riding my motorbike, that it was a distraction from the noise of the day, because I had to focus on what I was doing on the motorbike and be very aware of what's going on around me. Whereas if I'm sitting in the car, it's easy to drift when you're sitting in the car, because you're inside a metal cocoon that's protecting you from everything, and you can drift off and think about things. Whereas if you're riding a motorbike or riding a push bike, the margin for error is so much smaller. That you have to focus on what you're doing. And for me, that was it was a midlife crisis purchase, I think, the motorbike, I have to say. But it was good for my mental health, because it did give me an opportunity to escape from the noise of work and other things that were getting me down at the time. And being out on the open road, as you say, when even if you're not riding with anybody else, if you're just out there on your own, you can really just clear your head of all noise and clutter and enjoy the moment. And that's something I think we all need to probably do a bit more of. So, Alan, I've got through all of the questions I wanted to ask. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up today?
Yeah, I think we've covered the work thing, and I just want to emphasise that while we spend all our time at work, it should be in balance with the rest of us as a human being. And in the times when I have been totally dedicated to work, my own well-being has suffered. So I'm just recognising that if I'm doing well at the moment, it's because I have this balanced family life and I have this good stuff going on around me, and work's important.
Yep.
When in my work life, I believe we make a contribution. I feel like I'm giving something back to my community.
Yep.
That feels important. I give something back to the teams that I work with, and that's important. But not nourishing ourselves, we pay a terrible price for that. So we're not machines. We need time out.
For sure, yeah. I think we need the opportunity to recharge and start reset ourselves. I think on a regular basis. Certainly one of the things I found running a small business is that it's easy to let the business take over, and you have to be very deliberate about giving yourself time to recharge your own batteries. And I've been told many times by many different people that if you're not 100% right yourself and firing on all cylinders, it's much more difficult for you to help those around you. So you need to be a little bit selfish sometimes and focus on what you need, in order to be able to help your community as much as you want to, whether that community is you and your immediate family or whether it's a wider community. I think that you time is something we all need to make sure we get enough of in our lives.
Yeah, and it's what you do in the you time. There was an article on Stuff about a psychotherapist was saying she asked her clients what do they do at the weekend, because what you do during the week you have to do, but what you do at the weekend is your choice.
Yeah.
And she was wanting to know who are you with, why are you with them,
Yeah.
who are you not with, and what do you spend your money on. And time is like a checkbook, and if you look at the minutes of somebody's day at the weekend, if they're not with their friends or not with their family, or they're at work, or they're at playing sport non-stop or whatever, that's who they are. That's who they are currently.
Yeah.
And unless that's a nourishing thing.
You don't want to have only things in your life that drain your battery.
Yeah.
You need things in your life that recharge your battery.
And I guess if I was to finish on a note, I would say that for me, I make a conscious effort to reconnect with friends, because when I'm preoccupied or working too hard, they disappear, and I know that's bad. It's not good.
Absolutely right. I think you're right. That personal touch, again, we've touched on it a few times today, that having that connection, the real connection, not the Facebook status connection, is something that human beings really need, and we need to make sure we get as much of that as we can in our lives, for sure. Well, thank you very much, Helen. I've enjoyed talking to you today. It's been great to catch up with you again.
Yeah, likewise, Steve. Much appreciated.
And I'll let you know when I get this posted. Thank you for listening to my podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts, with me, Steve Penny. I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation, and I look forward to sharing my next conversation with you. If you want to find out some more, please do get in touch, and maybe we can have you on in a future show. Thank you.